I don't tell this story to scare people off the woods. I tell it because there are things out there that will wear the shape of what you want most and wait for you to step closer. They were waiting for us the week we thought we were smarter, safer, more prepared than the average hiker because we had a map with little boxes on it and a brochure that said hut to hut. I'm a structural engineer. My name is Caleb Hart. I read bridges, beams, foundations the way some folks read faces. In another life, I spent years as a claims assessor crawling through disasters and making sense of the senseless. That's probably why my friends wanted me along. Everyone likes a rational man in a place where nature can be unreasonable. We were for me. Nora Quinn, the quiet one who always had what you needed in the bottom of her pack and would not brag about it. Tyler Brooks, who joked when he was nervous and was nervous a lot. And Serena Pike, who could get mad at a sunrise for being too bright and still make you laugh about it. We signed up for a 5-day hut-to-hut trail run by an outfit that promised rustic shelters with bunks, insulated walls, sometimes even a stove and a view. No tents, no sleeping on the ground, no midnight wrestling with tarps in the rain, just miles and a warm place every night. The first 2 days were easy and good. The third had a novelty, a cafe at a lodge off the trail where we could get real coffee. On the 5th morning, we walked under the green canopy with that caffeine still faintly humming in our blood. The world felt well made. A turkey vulture circled above us, wobbling as if intoxicated by thermals. A deer bolted at the snap of a branch and left a ghost of itself between the pines. My knees hurt. My heart felt clean. We were singing when we rounded the bend and came to a concrete pad in a clearing. It took a second for my mind to fit shapes together. A low platform of poured slab, an iron park grill, a drift of splinters, glass glinting, hunks of insulation like dirty snow. The hut that was supposed to be waiting for us had been broken down to a pile. "Are you kidding me?" Serena said, like the forest had planned this just to insult her. "This is tonight's place." Tyler crouched, poked at a beam with his trekking pole. "What even? A tree fall? But where's the tree?" Nora was already walking a circle, scanning the canopy. No break in the crown. She murmured, "No fresh stumps. No tire ruts. Nothing dragged through here." They looked at me, the way you look at a man in a hard hat when you want the universe explained. I leaned on my stick and tried to make the rubble confess. A heavy load could collapse a roof if the trusses were rotten. I said, "Wind shear. A fulcrum hit. Some freak torsion. Speak English." "Professor." Serena snapped. "It doesn't look like a collapse." I admitted. "It looks pressed, like something pressed down evenly. But that's not how things happen in real life." "Great," she said. "So where are we sleeping? On your even press?" Nora didn't flinch. "We'll eat. We'll think," she said, voice as calm as if we'd expected all this. She walked to the park grill and produced, as if by sleight of hand, a paper bag, a coil of tinder, a collapsible pot, bowls, packets of ramen. She had always been prepared for small indignities, blisters, rain, a shelter crushed into splinters on a forest slab. Soon water hissed over flame and steam rose. We sat on the warm edge of the concrete, chewing noodles and apple slices, pretending we weren't calculating miles and daylight and options. By the time we packed, the day had softened. The trail ahead looked like a promise if you squinted hard enough. "It took us a morning to get here," Nora said. "If we keep a steady pace, we'll hit the next hut before dark. Or we'll hit its slab," Tyler said. "Keep moving," Nora told us. "We make the road by walking." We did. And the rhythm of feet and poles and the silly tune we'd been humming did their work on us. Our bodies did what bodies do when they're moving with purpose. They quiet the mind. We climbed a gentle rise and dropped into a grove where the trees opened like a curtain and then stopped as if the curtain had revealed a room we should not have seen. It was a cottage, or it was dressed as one. It sat in a ring of light, as if the forest had kept its distance out of respect. It was bigger than the huts we'd stayed in, with a steep roof and a short chimney that burped a soft plume of smoke. The door was oak, carved at the lintel with a wolf's head. The jambs were carved with children rude, cheerful figures with round faces and hands thrown up mid-play. At the corners of the house, two thick columns flanked the walls. They were not logs. They were carved to look like bird legs. Scaled and knuckle-danned, that is the sort of thing you tell yourself is a joke, because the alternative would make your heart pound too loud. Serena shaded her eyes and grinned like the punchline had finally landed. "This is ours," she said. "It has to be. Maybe they're upgrading. Maybe the crushed oneness is the replacement." "First, the cafe," Tyler said. "Now concierge service. I'll take it." Nora stood very still. I saw her shoulders tense like she was listening to another layer of the world. "It's too soon," she said. "We haven't walked nearly far enough. And there's smoke. If this were ours, the company would have told us." "Or they forgot," Serena said. "You ever met a spreadsheet that told the truth?" Tyler was already stepping onto the clearing, cheerful as a stray. "We can at least ask. Worst thing they can do is tell us to keep moving." "Don't," Nora said. But she moved with him anyway because that's what you do when you care. I followed because there are currents you feel in groups you can't resist. Like tide. The door was not latched. Tyler rapped his knuckles against it, and it swung inward a hand's width as if it had been waiting for the lightest touch. Heat breathed out. So did a smell, stock and herbs, and something richer and darker below those. The room we saw was an advertisement for comfort. A stone hearth in the center held a good fire. A blackened pot bubbled over it. Bunches of herbs and garlic hung from hooks. Jars lined a shelf. Roots. Dried leaves. A cobalt bottle with a handwritten label I could not read. On a butcher's block, a knife stood stabbed into a board, its handle too big. A set of stairs rose to a loft with a railing. Everything was generous in scale, like a stage set built for a tall audience. "Hello?" Tyler called. "We're hikers." The door slammed. It didn't swing shut like a wind had caught it or a hinge had sighed. It moved with will. It moved with the unavoidable force of a trap. Tyler yelped, and the sound cut off into a thin thread because the door caught his hand at the jamb and squeezed it like a vice. I hit the wood with my shoulder, and it might as well have been a wall poured from a single stone. "Push," I yelled. Nora was there with me in a heartbeat, and Serena was shrieking wordless syllables that were too loud to mean language. On the other side of the crack, my friend made a noise I had heard once before from a man whose foot was under a forklift. If you listen to enough wreckage, you learn to catalog the timbers of pain. This one had bone in it. I leaned to see through the slit the door had left, and something leaned back. The face it wore had the pattern of a human face, the way a mask hung in a museum has a face. The skin was the purple of old bruises. The hair was a mat with twigs in it. The eyes were yellow as candle flames in new air. And the smile, if that's what it was, showed teeth like instruments, not ornaments. I ducked back hard and kicked. The door gave a fraction, just enough for Tyler to wrench his arm an inch. Then it bit again, lower this time, across his fingers. I saw the old purple face tip in interest the way a neighbor might when you mention a recipe. It sang 3 notes pitched like comfort. "Oh, sweetheart," said a voice that could have soothed children to sleep on a night when wolves circled. "You're caught." I'd heard voices that tried to be 2 things at once. Voices that buried the steel under sugar. This was that, but deeper, as if the steel and sugar had fused into a new metal. The door yanked tight. Tyler screamed as if something on the other side had chosen a different method. Instead of releasing him the easy way, it released him the quick way. 2 fingertips, sheared off above the nail, dropped to the sill and bounced like pink dice. We ran. There are times to argue ethics and times to run. This was the latter. We didn't speak. We didn't plan. We ran the way prey runs, with our heads low and our bodies going before permission could chase after. In the trees behind us, something thumped. It wasn't the crackle of brush. It wasn't the patter of paws. It was a deep, regular emphasis, thump, thump, thump. Each thump farther from the cottage and nearer to us. Each a punctuation made by something too big to be a person, too deliberate to be weather. Don't go. The voice called, drifting between the trunks like an old lullaby. I did so enjoy your song. We crested a rise. The light had chilled without the sun moving. I saw shadows laid down in a new pattern, as if whatever had spoken had slid a different net over the world. When I turned to take my bearings, I saw the chimney of the cottage behind us, no more than 100 yards down the hill, as if we had been running in place. It moved. There is no simple way to tell you this. It moved. Not the way a building shudders in wind. It lifted. The columns at the corners carvings I had told myself were legs. They flexed. And the cottage rose. And the feet that had been stylized end caps were claws big enough to hook a tree. Pine needles fell from the roof and drifted like confetti. Nora had been silent. She spoke without looking away. Get down, she said. She knelt. Her hand went into her cargo pocket and came out with a revolver that would have looked ridiculous in a movie because the world we were in did not allow for guns to be in women's pockets. She braced, exhaled, and fired. The shot hit the twilight like a thrown brick through a window. Birds flew. The walking cottage paused, one leg folding in a hitch. And then it took another step. She fired again, and again. On the 4th shot, one of the legs scaled, knuckled, jointed wrong snapped. The cottage toppled like a slow building in an old training video, sideways into the trees. Go, Nora said, already pushing up, already running. We didn't argue. The thumps resumed before we had put a bin between us and where the cottage had fallen. Now there was a voice with them, not singing but talking, low and furious in a language that spat its consonants like seeds. Tyler kept his balance with the broken arm in a sling and the other held against his chest. His face gone gray and too quiet. He would drift and then jolt as Nora pulled him back and forced another step out of him. I kept looking for sign markers, for the orange blazes nailed at intervals to the trees, for a human permission stamped on bark. We passed the pad where the next hut should have been and saw only that concrete slab with wreckage flattened on it like a bug under a book. It was dark when we found the path that led off to the emergency shelter. I cannot tell you whether the dark had fallen early or whether we had simply entered a version of the woods where the light had stopped participating. We walked between 2 close rows of firs that formed a tunnel and came out at a brick building with a steel door and a phone in a glass box just inside. I retched in the grass and left the coffee from 3 mornings ago on the moss. Nora got Tyler onto the bench and Serena slid into a corner and moaned that she was sorry. She was sorry. She didn't know what she was sorry for, just that she owed someone an apology. Nora picked up the handset. When she spoke, her voice was the steady voice people find when a vacuum appears and someone has to be the air. We need help, she said. Hiker injury. 2 severed fingertips. 1 probable fracture. We're at the emergency hut off the... She looked to me. I gave her the trail number because that's what I could do. She repeated it. Yes, she said. We'll stay put. We stayed put and did not sleep. No one asked whether we should turn out the lights. None of us wanted to be in the dark, and none of us were willing to say it aloud. As if the words would make the dark feel snubbed and try harder to get in. Tyler went away once, his head slumping until his chin touched his chest. And I put a hand on his shoulder and said his name, and when he came back his eyes were wet and bright, and he whispered thank you like I had rescued him from something more than pain. An hour into the dusk, we heard a tune outside. It was the nonsense melody we had been humming earlier on the trail, the one that had no words and no right to be sad, sung by a voice that remembered every note and gave each one sympathy. The song walked around the shelter's brick like a slow inspection. It stopped once beneath the window and made a sound like a sniffing dog trying to decide if a scent was rabbit or fox. The door's hinges made no noise. The walls said nothing back. The phone sat in its cradle. Spent. I thought a lot about doors that night. I thought about the doors I've seen fail and the doors that held. There was a door on the other side of that clearing earlier that had not been a door the way a door is an agreement between two sides of a space. It had been a mouth. I thought about mouths and invitations and why some of us rush toward both. Morning came the way a hangover does. It didn't cure anything. It clarified. The phone rang at 9. A ranger's voice told us there was a team on its way and asked about bleeding. Color. Temperature. Nora answered like a nurse. Serena stared at the floor. Tyler said nothing because the world had become too loud and he was trying to hear his own breath under it. 2 EMTs arrived with a ranger. They put Tyler on a gurney with the efficiency that comes from repetition and did not ask the wrong questions. The ranger was a man in his 30s whose face looked like it had been punched by weather. He listened to me. He didn't do the smile that says this man wants attention, so I will give him something and call it attention. He wrote what I told him in a notebook that was almost out of pages. I said, the hut wasn't there. Then a different hut was there. The door did that to Tyler's hand, and I pointed at the wrapped palm. There was a person inside, or something that wanted to be a person. The cottage moved on legs. It felt wrong to say legs, but the word had applied. I told him about the carvings on the door frame, the wolf, the children in about the jars and the blade, and the way the knife scale had been a little off, as if someone had tried to copy a kitchen without ever quite seeing one. When I told him about the voice, he blinked slow like something had just clicked in his memory. You heard it speak? He said, and I watched him write the word speak as if the pencil weighed more. Yes, I said. It called us sweethearts. It sang the song we were singing. He flipped the notebook shut not like an end, but like a pause. We've had winter wine bring old pines down on structures before. We get copycat cabins sometimes. Off the books. Kids. Survivalists. Cult folks building on parkland. We'll check the area. You won't find the house, Serena said. She wasn't guessing. She had the look of someone who had been turned around by something bigger than a joke. You'll find signs like a giant stepped. You'll call them something else. He looked at her, then at Nora, then at me. He did not look at the concrete pads in his head or the policy manual where words like liability live. I'll tell my team where to look, he said. 2 days later he called me back. His name was Castillo. He said they found broken trees, but nothing like a cottage. He said he'd logged it for maintenance, remove hazards, clear the trail. He said he was glad Tyler was okay. He said, in a way that made the quiet around it loud, that he appreciated our detailed statement. I could hear an office behind him. People passing. Radios clipped to belts hissing in shorthand. He was not a fool. He was a man who had to put a label on a shelf that had room for only certain labels and a lot of things to put away. When I tell you the trail company is thriving and the huts are booked 2 seasons out, I don't tell you that to point a finger. They sell exactly what people want. The idea that the unknown can be organized if you purchase the right map. The problem is not maps. The problem is the unknown. Every time I drive past a certain line of trees that looks like the ones we ran through that day, I feel a pulse in my wrists and a tension in my jaw. I have a stress dream where I'm trying to explain a failure mode to a customer and realize halfway through that the beam I'm describing is my own rib cage. I tell myself that's a boring metaphor, and then I remember that boring metaphors are where the truth hides when it doesn't want to get scratched. I don't hike anymore. Nora will go on day trails with her nieces, to places where she can see the road from the ridge and waving people look like people and not ideas in the green. Tyler's hand healed into a shape that makes strangers think he's a guitarist who had to quit. Serena can sit in a room with a closed door and not look at it every minute. But it took a year. And some nights when rain hits the windows, she calls me just to borrow a voice until the rhythm slows. I know what you want. The ones of you who don't believe. You want me to tell you what it was. Or to say it was a person living illegally in a park who liked to carve. Or to admit we were tired and scared and misread a pile of logs for legs and a gust of wind for a mind. I want that, too. I want it so badly it burns a little when I say I can't have it. What I can give you are the parts: a door that bit like a machine, a smell of food that can only be called hunger wearing perfume, a voice that braided two truths into one beckoning lie, signs of pressure on concrete pads, as if something heavy spread its weight with care. A ranger who was surprised not by the idea of a moving house, but by the fact that it spoke. A sound at night that carried the tune I had been dumb enough to hum in daylight. Sometimes I take my engineer's habit to it. The way a widow presses the shirts that haven't been worn for months. I line up the pieces and look for the connection I must have missed. There is always one bend you don't see. One vector that makes the whole structure make sense. If I ever find it, I'll wish I hadn't. There was one thing I didn't tell Ranger Castillo and do not plan to tell anyone in a uniform. In the emergency hut, when the song circled us and Nora's hand gripped the revolver and the phone sat dead, I remembered the carvings on the doorframe wolf. Children. I remembered the huge knife. The jars. The strange, lovely smell. I remembered the oversized furniture. My grandmother had a book of stories in her pantry where she hid the flour. Stories so old the edges of the paper had gone to lace. Stories with women who were not women and houses that were not houses and rules that were not about morality, but about survival. Don't invite hunger to sit with you. Don't accept kindness from strangers who do not breathe the way living things breathe. Don't sing at the edge of dark, because some things will take your chorus as a map. There are versions of those stories all over the world. They wear different hats. They use different spoons. They know our names better than we know theirs. If you're waiting for a moral, you can have this. The woods don't owe you magic. And if they give you any, don't take seconds. If you want something to argue about, here is something true that I don't know how to place. After the ranger called me that second time to tell me what they had and had not found, he paused and asked a question that did not belong in a government call. What did it call you? He said, sweethearts. I said. He breathed out like a man who had remembered an old word. That's new. He said, it's usually children. We were not children. We were four adults who bought a product and walked into a story that didn't care how many liability waivers we had signed. I am telling you this in the hope that some of you will say I'm lying, or that my brain broke under stress, or that trying to get clicks made me dress up a run-of-the-mill injury with folk paint. I am also telling you this because some of you will feel something in your teeth when you read it. The way you feel weather before the sky changes. That feeling is not a burn. It is not bravery. It is recognition. If you go out there, sing quietly. When you see a door, remember it's a mouth. When you see a house where no house should be, remember that you are seeing not an error but a performance. Do not be the audience it wants. We didn't die. That counts for something. It counts for almost everything. But no one asks what else got broken. The land never owed us an explanation. The people who manage it do owe us honesty. If you want the rest, go hum under the boughs and wait. Something will hum back. Tyler likes to say he lost 2 fingertips to a story. It's how he takes a fact that could curdle every handshake and turns it into something he can hold without bleeding. I don't correct him. Some days I think he's wrong. He lost them to appetite. Not his. The kind that never needed a body to begin with. Just a shape to fill and a door to push. You want a clean end? Here is the cleanest I can give you. We never went back. None of us did. The brochures kept printing. The huts kept booking. The trail got cleared. On a map. It is a line from point A to point B with little boxes along the way like neat teeth. In my head, it is a circle walked by something patient enough to follow a melody until the mouse that made it become available. If you've made it this far, I want to hear you. Not just whether you believe me. I want to hear where you draw your lines in the world. Do we laugh at stories like this until they turn on us? Or do we argue for caution until life feels smaller than it should? How do you feel about the line between necessary force and cruelty? Whether from a person or a system? How much hunger are we willing to tolerate in the name of adventure? In the name of profit? In the name of looking brave? Tell me in the comments what you think about violence and injustice. Where you see them in your life. Where you think we should pull back and where you think we should push. Tell me if you would have knocked on that door. Tell me what you would have done the second it shut. I'm listening. I'm still trying to decide what to call the thing that shut it.